Electricity, the life force behind every home, shop and factory. Its benefit to the community is incalculable, but used in an unsafe way, it can show little mercy. Throughout the country, several people die each year in accidents involving overhead lines and underground cables. Over the next few minutes, you'll see outlined a number of television commercials relating to this aspect of electrical safety. But more importantly, you'll also see the messages behind each one.
Electricity can kill. Watch out for overhead power lines.
So, what exactly happened here? Let's take a closer look. As the tipper truck arrives at the site, he passes a high voltage pole with a warning triangle. In Britain and Northern Ireland, the signs follow this format, whilst in the Irish Republic, the signs look like this. Already it's clear that both the driver and the foreman are over casual. The lorry stops directly underneath the lines, and as it elevates, there's no dialogue between the two men. The first sign that there's a problem is when the tipper comes into contact with the overhead conductors. The driver panics, and seeing that there's a risk of fire, jumps clear of the truck without touching the door or the frame on his way out. Meanwhile, his partner, instead of staying well away, races towards the truck and receives a fatal electric shock. In this case, it's likely that his death was instantaneous. So, how could this accident have been prevented? To understand how he died, it's necessary to understand something more about how electricity can kill. When the driver was in the cab and contact was made with the power lines, electric current travelled through the truck to the ground. In this situation, the driver is not likely to be electrocuted, as the circuit to the ground is not completed through him. However, there is a risk of fire, so he chooses to jump clear from the cab. At the point the assistant touches the cab door with his hand, the circuit is completed, and he suffers a fatal electric shock and burns. You can only receive a fatal shock if you complete the circuit.
There's no doubt that many people are not aware of the dangers of electricity. One of the most dangerous times is immediately after an incident. The line may look dead, but it can still be live and it can still kill. Whatever you do, stay away, keep others away until the equipment has been made safe by the local electricity company.
This accident was entirely avoidable. Firstly, the driver should never have been in this position in the first place. Contact with an overhead power line can cause injury, or as we've just seen, death. On arrival at a site, seek out the foreman before you drive into the site. Then look around and assess any likely hazards. This is not just a good idea, it's the law. Check the safety booklets provided by our electricity supplier. Regulations state that you're duty-bound to assess the danger from electricity. If, however, you have to work near these lines, then tell your local electricity supplier first and give as much notice as possible. Ideally, a site should be properly marked out with fixed post fencing and brightly coloured bunting to prevent access to the line. Alternatively, if machinery has to pass under a line, then a system of rigid goalposts and barriers would be ideal. But if things do go wrong and you're trapped in a potentially lethal vehicle, then follow this three-point plan. Jump well clear rather than step down. Do not touch the vehicle or any wires. Keep away and keep others away from the machine. It could still be live. Phone your local electricity supplier immediately and wait until the situation is made safe by electricity company staff.
What you've just seen hasn't been dramatised for TV. This is a typical scenario which we've had the unfortunate job of explaining to the families of several people unnecessarily bereaved. You've just seen an incident involving a tipper truck. This next incident, again based on an actual event, involves a crane and one very unfortunate slingsman.
electricity can kill. Watch out for overhead power lines.
So, like the previous incident, there are lessons to be learned here. The crane is positioned directly underneath an 11 kV overhead line. This would never have happened had they spoken to the appointed person on site overseeing the lifting operation. The driver and the two slingsmen seem unaware of the warning triangle on the high voltage pole. As the crane driver moves the jib closer to the line, the two slingsmen manipulate the girders and move them into position, an unsafe act in itself, as they could be hit by the moving beams. When the jib strikes the overhead line, electric current passes through the chains, giving the slingsman a fatal electric shock. And when an accident does happen, only the lucky ones live to tell the tale.
A few years ago I was asked to construct a steel frame building on a particular site. The site was very close to overhead power cables. It was a lovely bright sunny morning. The crane driver set up his machine. He started to extend his jib towards the rear of the site to make sure that he was able to reach that particular point. One of the erectors had the hold of the chains and was guiding the crane driver, asked him to extend his jib to its full capacity to see if he could reach the back end of the site. Unfortunately, the driver didn't see the cables because of the sun in his eyes, and as he extended the jib touched the cables. The erector, of course, was electrocuted. Unfortunate for everybody, but it was just an accident.
So far we've looked at the dangers of working near overhead lines, but there is another equally deadly hazard which can all too easily remain unseen: underground cables.
Think before you dig. Contact your local electricity supplier.
So, how could this have been prevented? One way is by avoiding the immediate area. Remember, the closer the banksman is to the centre of the excavation, the greater the risk. Ideally, he should be well away from the hole. In all cases, you must assume that buried cables are present until it's proven otherwise. Proving that the area is clear of cables can be carried out in a number of ways. Study plans. You can get hold of plans from your local authority or from your electricity supplier. Give as much notice as possible to the local office. Use a cable locating device. If you're still not 100% sure, then hand dig until all the cables have been exposed. Never attempt to move a cable. And watch out for signs of services such as street lamps or cable markers, tape tiles or wooden boards. Victims of accidents involving buried cables are as likely to suffer burn injuries as they are to be electrocuted. More often than not, such injuries are usually caused by the explosive effects of arcing current. This is often followed by fire. Typical injuries include severe burns to hands, face and body. Very often these burns prove to be fatal.
Stay alert. Stay alive. Watch out for overhead power lines.
The accident involving the mobile scaffolding unit could equally be applied to working with aluminium ladders. But the incident that you've just seen was so easily preventable by avoiding the area altogether or by recognizing the hazard and disassembling the scaffolding before passing through the area.
There really are many myths about the dangers of electricity. Here are just a few comments.
It's okay. I've seen people handling overhead power lines.
Yes, electricity workers do sometimes handle overhead lines, but only under controlled conditions.
One thing that I've heard is you can paint around them.
Don't try it. Electricity can arc. In other words, it can travel through the air carrying a deadly shock.
There's nothing to worry about. All these lines are insulated.
How do you know? And even if they are insulated, how do you know that the insulation is intact? Stay away from power lines. These concrete delivery units are a relatively new hazard, but already several people have died.
Stay alert. Stay alive. Watch out for overhead power lines.
The problem, as you've just seen, arises when the unit is elevated and touches overhead lines. Sometimes this happens when the unit is being placed in position. Other times accidents occur when the job is complete and the unit is being hosed down. These accidents are particularly nasty and can so easily be prevented. Firstly, look up and check for overhead lines. Secondly, when it's time to wash the unit down, then place the conveyor belt in the horizontal position, where there's no danger from overhead lines. Our final category involves agricultural machinery, which has resulted in several deaths in recent years.
Electricity can kill. Watch out for overhead power lines.
In the incident you've just seen, the driver was not killed, though had he touched the tractor after having jumped clear, he probably would have been. The primary cause of this incident was the farmer's inattention. Whenever you enter a field, it only takes a moment to make a brief visual inspection for overhead power lines. The danger, however, is not restricted to tractors. Any farming implement that has the potential to come into contact with power lines can kill. Certain slurry spreaders can become lethal if the liquid material is discharged near overhead lines. This is because the liquid spray is capable of conducting electricity down the spreader. Irrigation pipes are good conductors of electricity and can kill. There are times when you can be safe 1 minute and in mortal danger the next. For example, sitting on top of a high load can bring you into contact with overhead power lines. The chute of a combine harvester has the potential to contact overhead lines, as has the forage harvester. This video should give you an insight into the dangers of overhead lines and underground cables. It's a deadly serious subject. Electricity rarely gives you a second chance. So take time to make yourself aware of the dangers, and if you're in any doubt at all, contact your local electricity supplier. One day, your life may well depend on it.